Should WNBA players be paid more? Is banning TikTok the same as banning assault rifles? Is it bad if the Fed raises interest rates? We'll talk about these takes and more on today's episode of Good Take, Bad Take. Hey friends, welcome to this episode of Good Take, Bad Take. This is the show where we gather social media posts and takes that we see in our feeds. Each week we go through the good ones, highlight what they're doing awesome and the good arguments they're making. We also take on the bad ones, point out the flaws in their arguments and some of their underlying assumptions that they may not get absolutely correct. My name is Britt and I'm here with my co-host Donald. And before we get started, make sure to like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. We love to see it and we love to keep growing. And we really appreciate all of your support over the few years that we've been doing this. Kind of crazy, man. It's been a few years now. I guess it's not been few. It's been two almost. It'll be two in April. Right. Yeah.
It depends on what you count as a few, but over the span of multiple years now.
Well, I think few, it becomes few after once it's three, right? Because I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Once we cross into 23, we can say we have done it for a few years because we'll have done it for more, within the years of 2021, 2022, and 3. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So without further ado, we're going to get to our first take that we're going to analyze. And it's a video one. This is the first for Good Take, Bad Take.
We are not asking to get paid what the men get paid. We're asking to get paid the same percentage of revenue shared.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Got it. So that's a huge misconception.
That's a huge misconception.
Got it. Okay,
sure. Yeah, because every video is like, oh, this person gets paid this person gets paid that, right?
So I want to be really clear about that. Like, I don't think I should get paid the same as LeBron.
Right.
But the percentage of revenue, like, for example, they sell my jersey in Mandalay Bay, I don't get a dime.
You don't get any money from jersey sales?
That's crazy.
In the NBA, they have percentages of revenue shared for the players, right? So jersey sales, obviously, their TV contracts. You see these every year, these contracts get bigger and bigger and bigger, right?
Yeah, massive.
But that's because their CBA, it negotiates where if the owners are making certain types of money, they get that as well.
Got it.
In the WNBA, that's not the case.
Awesome. So that went really smooth. This is a hilarious video to me for a lot of reasons. But let's hear your thoughts, Donnie. What good or bad take?
It's a bad take. It seems to me that one of the great things about the internet and one of the great things about people having their voice amplified is that common misconceptions that I've heard well before internet memehood, although the internet did help spread these ideas as well. These misconceptions like the wage gap or unequal pay in certain professions like this, the disparity between what the men's league sports make and the women's league sports makes, these kinds of things. When they get exploded all over the place, again, I'd heard these things before the internet, although the internet did help amplify them. What the internet's really great about doing is actually stuffing those little myths back into their hole. And so things like, the unequal pay between women and men's sports had been pretty thoroughly refuted, I feel like. There were plenty of people from all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of angles talking about why asking for the same pay for these two different things is kind of silly and ridiculous. And so now it feels like we've come to the point where that argument against the common narrative that once was has been so saturated that people feel like they need to make a new argument, which is actually really, really kind of a white pill to me. Because Kelsey here in this isn't saying I shouldn't get paid the same as LeBron. I think not that long ago, the arguments were literally...
There were those arguments.
The top players in the WNBA should be making the same as the top players in the men's NBA. And so this is really exciting. Now, of course, the really funny thing about this, as not something that I personally knew from... I don't really follow sports that closely, but something that the internet highlighted in the way that it does, the responses to this has been, the women's NBA loses money every year. And so if you're to take a percentage of a loss, that means that she should be paying the WNBA a salary rather than her getting paid a salary. If I'm understanding that correctly, which I believe I am.
Yeah, the WNBA has lost money every single year since its inception. And this is, I think this is a bad take as well. Thumbs down. It's really funny that it's like, because that's the typical response is like, well, it used to be, I want to be paid $32 million a year like LeBron. And then when people are like, well, the WNBA makes literally like hundreds of times less than the NBA does. Then they're like, well, I want the percentage. It's like, well, the WNBA loses money. So I don't know what you're going to do with that. It's heavily subsidized by by the teams that do make money, which is the NBA teams. But I think about, I don't know if you've ever seen this TikTok. It's, and no offense to female basketball players, right? Like, play basketball, do all that stuff. It's great. But the fact of the matter is no one really wants to see you. And in this TikTok video, a guy literally goes out on the street during a day that the Seattle Storm are playing. The Seattle Storm is the only basketball team that Seattle has. It's a woman NBA team. And he says, I can give you front row seats to the Storm game tonight, or I'll give you $1. And everyone chooses the $1, at least everyone that's included in the video. But the fact that there's anyone that would choose the $1 over, the front row seats just shows you that that's what is valued, right? Like, in our libertarian philosophy, the value of something is that which someone is actually willing to pay for it. And obviously, front row seats to a WNBA game is worth less than $1 to a lot of folks. At least might be worth a lot to a few folks, but most folks it's not.
Well, and the thing I think that people sometimes conflate is kind of what you were touching on right at the end there, where the perception of value. I don't think the women's NBA has no value just because it loses money, but it means that the value that it provides has to be paid for by someone else. And when something like the WNBA is subsidized, that doesn't mean it necessarily shouldn't exist. It just means that the people who care the most about it are going to subsidize it. If you're making a product like, the WNBA as a whole is a product, whether you want to think about it that way or not, it is. When you're making a product, if you don't have enough buyers, that's a problem. But if you have one benefactor who's willing to pay for it to exist for other people, that's also a way of fulfilling that cost. It's kind of like how charities operate. And I'm not calling the WNBA a charity per se, but I'm just saying that the value of something is subjective. And if your audience, the audience watching isn't valuing it enough for it to be sustainable, then that's the reality, and you have to recognize that within its limitations. That doesn't mean it shouldn't exist. That doesn't mean it can't exist. You can have people who are going to bail it out and take a loss because they think it's worth existing, or maybe it brings them value in a different way, shape, or form, and that's fine. But then the people participating in that system need to recognize that reality and think, okay, so the value that LeBron brings is an entirely different value than the value I'm bringing, even on a percentage level, because whoever's valuing what I'm doing is subsidizing it. There's not enough general interest to keep it afloat otherwise. So again, because saying there's not a market for something doesn't necessarily mean there's not a market, period. It just means there's not a widespread market to sustain it unless someone's willing to take a loss. And that might be someone might be willing to do that, as they currently are, and that's fine. But it's just not sustainable on its own. You have to create value in other areas to make up for that.
Yes, it's I looked up the actual numbers. So the WNBA makes $60 million in revenue per year. On average, they have operating costs of $70 to $75 million in operating costs, and so the NBA actually subsidizes about $10 to $15 million per year of their cost to cover it. What's really ironic about it is, so there's about 144 WNBA players. Average salary is about $120,000. So basically, all of the salaries that are paid, if you divide $15 million by 144 people, it's about $100,000 per year. All of their salaries are paid for by the NBA, right? If you subtract out all the other costs, all the other stuff, and you're like, okay, well, whatever excess is left over is for salaries. It's like, well, it's all paid for by the NBA. So like you're saying, if this gal wants to actually be paid in a percentage, she'd be paying the NBA to play. But they, strategically, there are businesses out there that strategically have units that do function at a loss because it fulfills some strategic objective, right? Right. But because you don't generate value, or if you don't generate money, I guess that's maybe the better way to put it, you generate value in some other way, you have to still make sure that it's not, the loss leader is not going to be like something that puts you out, right? So it sounds like what they're demanding is that the NBA players give more of their percentage to them.
Well, yeah, and if she wants to make a case that she is providing some unique benefit or value, or the players are, then she needs to make that case to the owners, or have some group negotiate on their behalf, and that's fine. But that's not a case you should be making generally to the public, because the public isn't the one that's paying your salary. Like you pointed out, it's the NBA. So that's a conversation that she needs to have. And, maybe she has good arguments for that. I'm not trying to say she doesn't deserve to get paid X, Y, or Z. She can make the argument that, yes, the WNBA is currently losing money. However, being an outspoken face of the WNBA, I'm getting, I don't know, young girls interested in sports, and that's a worthy cause. And therefore, I've been able to do this much outreach this year. That's why you should pay me more. Maybe that's the value you're playing. Or, you are subsidizing this. You love watching women's basketball, and I've done amazing this year. And so then you appeal to that person. That's fine.
Yep.
The reason why she's appealing to the mass public is because she wants the general public on her side, but they're not the ones paying the salary. They shouldn't be the ones that you're trying to convince, frankly.
Yeah. Hey, you're not really like a UFC MMA fan at all.
I haven't followed it particularly.
Okay.
No.
So up until Conor McGregor, the one of the highest paid fighter was a gal named Ronda Rousey, and amazing fighter. And then she got KO'd pretty hard, but she was very entertaining, great fighter, really entertaining fights, dominant in her sport. And when someone asked her, like, "Hey, like, don't you think women in sports should be paid more?" She said, "No, like, you should get paid what your value is. And my value is in the fact that I put butts in seats and I get people to buy pay-per-views. And so I get a percentage. The reason I'm worth tens of millions of dollars is because I get a percentage of all the seats that I put in, or butts in seats that I get, into the arena, and the people that purchase my stuff on the TV." And so, like, she's spot on, right? And she's a woman, really entertaining fights, awesome fights to watch and all that stuff. And so it's not simply because it's women in sports. It's simply because women in sports generate different levels of interest depending on what type of sport it is, how good they are at their skill level. Fighting just happens to be that, most of the time women can't beat men in a fight, especially at like that high of a level, but it's still entertaining regardless, right? And people want to see the best of the best in certain categories, whether it's men or weight class or anything like that. And so they're going to pay to watch it, especially if it's entertaining and the person's a good, trash talk or anything like that. So, people can, like, the WNBA players could carve out a niche, right? They just need to find out what that value is, and they need to get people watching the WNBA, and they need to get people, going to the arena to watch. If they did that, then they can make the case. But until then, it's pretty hard.
Yeah, I think about that general attitude, not Ronda Rousey's, the one of like Kelsey Plum in the clip here, and I contrast it with an entrepreneur or a small business owner who's taking losses. They're basically getting no salary for much of the time that they start a business and many of its years afterward in order to build it into something that is profitable. And so rather than asking the question, why am I not getting paid more? The entrepreneur thinks, why, or what do I need to do to make this more profitable?
Yeah.
And
why are people not buying my stuff? That's
right. Or how do I cut costs so my margins are better? Whatever it is, you figure out the problem, and then you find the solution that's going to generate more revenue so you can make more production so that you can get a salary yourself, and so you can keep growing your business. And that's kind of the opposite of the tact of saying we deserve this pay on something that's not profitable.
Yep. Absolutely. All right, moving on to our next one. We've got Ted Lieu, and he is a congressperson, right?
I believe so, yeah. I think out of California. I could be mistaken.
Okay. And he tweets out, "No, we can't." And it's to someone was basically
retweet that was deleted. It's like some no-name account, and so no one screenshotted it. I looked up and down, but I could not find the original tweet.
They were basically saying, I think I remember. They were basically saying, "Hey, like, Elon Musk is saying prosecute Fauci. Why can't you censor him? Or pass laws, whatever." And so Ted Lieu says, "No, we can't censor him. We are a free country. Elon Musk can post smart things or stupid things. He can choose to promote cute cat videos over boring Jim Jordan tweets or not. He can amplify COVID deniers or not. The Constitution prevents government from regulating speech on Twitter." All right, what do you think, Donnie?
This was a surprisingly good take.
Yeah.
This guy is the number one reply in this Twitter thread that I saw was that Onion article, or the picture from the Onion article of heartbreaking. The worst person you know just made a great point. And and I feel that on a lot of levels. This guy is not known for having good takes, but here he is spot on. There's plenty of things I could criticize, like, wow, you're only getting around to it now, and where were you 4 years ago? Doesn't really matter in the context of this take. This take is correct. He's posting it at a time when it's not very popular to post this.
Yeah.
He's at a time when it's not, the person who he's defending isn't popular amongst his base. So, every other reason I could complain about this, I really don't want to, because frankly, this is just a good take. It's just that simple.
Yeah. It's I agree with you that it's a really good take. I think that it makes me skeptical when you put it that way, that like he's saying it even though everyone is against Elon Musk, and it's like not popular, because it's like, when has a congressperson ever done something that isn't popular with their base? So maybe there's some demographic or statistical switch that's going on that we're not aware of. But regardless, the content of it's really good. The only little piece that I could like critique him on is like the Constitution prevents government from regulating speech on Twitter. Because I mean, what could be inferred by that is like, well, we need to change the Constitution. It's like, no, it's like, it's just bad practice regardless to regulate speech on Twitter. Like, let people say the stupid things and then let's debate them. And then he could have provided, in a thread after this, like why these people are stupid for saying what they say. But I like it. It's refreshingly, it reminds me of the politics that my parents told me existed 40 or 50 years ago, right? I don't know if it actually did or not, but where everyone just was gung-ho on where we're going and everyone has rights and all this stuff. But yeah, good job, Congressman Ted Lieu. It's good.
Yeah, to your point, it makes me think of the days, which I think did exist, frankly, to some degree, usually probably more on local levels, where people on the right and the left disagreed on maybe the direction, but they agreed on the process to get there, kind of a thing. And I think ultimately you and I would agree that something like the Constitution is just, it's bound to be eroded because of the very nature of a government. It will seek its own power. But for a time, it, held off some level of absolute power grabs directly. I think about the fact that, one of my colleagues, just absolute wizard on anything, like all of the boring things about government that you like, the budgets that release and stuff, he'll read through and find the interesting things in them. And you're like, I don't know how you stay awake reading this, let alone process it and find it. Just absolute wizard of a human. He talks about how in the Gregoire administration, who was the governor in Washington state, prior to 2012. So I think she was 2000 through 2012, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's right. Anyway, during that administration, she was a Democrat. We had Democrat legislature. She would ask my colleagues advice on things, and he is not a lefty. He is a fiscal conservative guy. He's been, the number one guy calling the capital gains tax and income tax, despite Democrats' efforts. He's been vocally calling for sales tax cuts and things like that. But there was at least a level of, I'm going to ask for this guy because he's an expert's opinion. And so I don't know how common that was. I don't know how real it was nationally, but it at least existed to some degree. And so I think you're right. I think this take kind of is reminiscent of that. And I hope that, I think Ted is more of a progressive type, sort of, if I had to put him on a scale from, I don't know, Amy Klobuchar to Bernie Sanders, I would probably put him more in the Bernie Sanders side of things. Although I know that's a small window for some, so I apologize for simplifying things. But I think he's more on the progressive end, and so I do hope that this stirs a little bit of the rabid left, on especially the terminally online people, to see, no, it's okay to defend people you hate on things, right? It's okay to uphold a principle, even if someone you don't like benefits from it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it would, but if there are more takes like this, then good, I guess.
Yeah. Good on him. All right. Moving on to our next one. We've got Richie Torres, and he is quote retweeting Elon Musk, and Elon Musk retweeted out, "My pronouns are prosecute/Fauci." And then Richie Torres writes, "Elon Musk wants to criminalize Anthony Fauci because he disagrees with him. Elon is no champion of free speech." Oh boy. I mean, everyone knows our thoughts on Fauci. So, but what do you think, Donnie? I got to know.
This is, not only is it a bad take, it's one of the most disingenuous takes. Like, tell me that you don't understand the opposition without telling me you don't understand the opposition. There is no possible interpretation of prosecuting Fauci under the guise of free speech. No one in the history of ever has said that it's a free speech thing. The closest you could say is that Fauci lied, but even that's not a free speech issue. You're not silencing someone for lying. You're holding them accountable for lying in a position of power to the American people with a lack of transparency. First Amendment free speech has nothing to do with the reasons that Fauci should be prosecuted, let alone the fact that Elon wants to prosecute him, is a result of Fauci disagreeing with Elon, which is, of course, also an absurd thing. I mean, it's true in the sense that Elon disagrees with Fauci because there is evidence and data and real world examples that back up reality, which Fauci disagrees with. So I guess in that sense, they disagree. But this is just a confusingly bad take where he gets the motive wrong and he gets the sort of the how wrong and the why wrong.
Yeah.
It's so stupid.
Yeah, it's definitely a bad take for me. Coming from the party and the side that very much says that like violent or that speech can be violence or whatever. I think of all concepts they should understand, like even if they don't agree with it, they should understand the conservative, not even the conservative, just the anti-lockdown perspective on this, which is that Anthony Fauci lied to us, lied about the data, lied about masks, recommended shutdowns of schools, all of his different, recommended vaccines that have hurt and killed people. It's like, well, even though he didn't directly perpetuate or do these actual actions that hurt people, he recommended in the best case scenario, and in a lot of ways pressured institutions, states, governments, local governments, and companies to hurt people. And so just through that, it's like there is a case to be made, and you can now weigh and actually argue against that, right? But like Richie just completely misses that. He's like, no, Fauci was just giving his opinion, like as he's supposed to do. And, sometimes he got it right, sometimes he got it wrong. And, should we all have free speech? It's like, man, that is not at all what we're talking about. Like we're talking about someone that leveraged their position, we think leveraged their position for personal gain at the loss, of wealth, health, and blood on American soil. And like you're saying, it just demonstrates that he doesn't understand his opposition, and therefore he's not someone that can really be talked to, which is really unfortunate, right? Like I would like for there to be a discussion about what's going on now that the evidence is so clear as day that the vaccines don't work, that the virus was created in a lab in Wuhan, that there was a concerted effort by the media and by Fauci and by Francis Collins to stigmatize and hurt scientists and doctors that didn't agree with them. Like all those things should be talked about, right? Even if our side that believes all those things is not right, you should still talk about it so you can at least debunk it so that no one talks about it ever again, right? But this guy just has no ability to understand where we're coming from. He's either drank the Kool-Aid so thoroughly and it's permeated throughout his entire body that he just can't see straight, or he's just a straight up unethical liar. I mean, I can't really see any other option at this point.
Yeah, I'm not familiar enough with Richie Torres to know his motives, what they may be. But regardless of his particular, whether it's malicious or misinformed, there are plenty of misinformed people who will just echo this and repeat it. And that's the frustrating thing about it, right? You have so many people who are just going to take this tweet at its word, like, wow, yeah, Elon Musk doesn't care about free speech. And this is kind of one of those things where I'm almost like, once again, you're kind of right for the wrong reason. It's like all the people criticizing Trump. Oh, he's a terrible president. He pulled us out of the climate accord. You're like, you're kind of right, but for the wrong reason. It's like Elon Musk, I wish he was better on free speech than he is. It seems, I don't know how true it is. It seems possible, at least, that he may have shadow banned people who mentioned him inappropriately or unfavorably, I should say. Which again, we don't know if that's true or not. It's possible, it's potential, but he's talked about freedom of speech not meaning freedom of reach, so he's not totally opposed to the idea of silencing people. But wanting to prosecute Fauci is not that. That is not the reason you should be mad at him. And so sending swarms of people to go dunk on him for that reason just seems like kind of a waste. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you could get on about the subsidies or about him, mining the lithium out of wherever and all that stuff. But no, it's when the venerated Saint Fauci that he comes after him that now it's time to sick them all. And to be fair, I mean, I was like pretty surprised, to be honest with you, when I saw Musk tweet it out, because that's a pretty incendiary take, right? Like from such a high profile person, at least.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people in our movement that have been saying things like that, and I agree that he should be prosecuted. But for someone like him, I mean, arguably probably the most, maybe not the most famous, but the most the person with the biggest reach of voice right now in the world saying that. That's a pretty big deal. Somewhat of a white pill in my mind.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, moving on to our next one. We've got Antonio Arreo, who tweets out, breaking, the governor of Texas just banned TikTok on all state-issued devices. Shouldn't he have banned assault rifles before TikTok? What do you think?
Not a good take. It's one of those things where I don't love the idea of banning an app either. I don't like that, but I understand the justification for it. I back
on state issue devices.
Yeah, so exactly. So I'm like, well, that I get that. I think on the state issue devices it's fine. Just like a business can run in its own way. That's all right. I won't put too much qualms there. Shouldn't even ban assault rifles. I mean, for one thing, I guess I'd be okay with that if he's talking about banning assault rifles for government employees.
Yes,
if that's what he's talking about. So maybe it's an accidentally based take.
Yes, yeah, that's what I was thinking because I guess he's talking about the state, and the state probably has the right to ban TikTok from their devices because there's some security that we know that there are security breach issues with the app. So yeah, ban assault rifles, ban all weapons for the state. That sounds great to me, but we both know that's not what he's talking about. I mean, this is a really funny way to like bait and switch people. Like it's like this has no bearing on the reasoning that the governor banned TikTok on state issued devices, and it's state issued devices. It's like, is he really conflating that like consumers shouldn't have the right to have TikTok because of security? It's like, I think everyone at this point knows that if you have TikTok on your phone, chances are the Chinese government probably knows what you're doing. But like people that have it on their phone are like, well, I just like watching these different videos of whatever is on TikTok enough to like grant them that permission. So yeah, it's just such a weird, like he came up with this in his brain, like in the shower, and then he got out of the shower and was like, I'm going to tweet this. Like, I think it will get it did. It got a lot of interactions, 72,000 likes and 13,000 comments. So it's just, ugh.
Yeah, it's frustrating because, like you point out, there's no logical cohesion to the argument. And any way you look at it, they're completely unrelated. But even just the logistics of, let's, for the sake of argument, say that he banned TikTok in the state of Texas. That's pretty difficult to enforce. That's pretty invasive to enforce. It's also a lot less dangerous to enforce than removing assault rifles. So even if you wanted to take it at the most generous equivalency, one has you invading people's personal private property and their personal, ownership of their phones and invading their privacy that way. The other one has you invading people's personal private property and trying to take away their means for self-defense, which is liable to come back and shoot you. So even there, it's like, I don't know, the way that the phrasing of this makes it seem like his statement is breaking. The governor just banned this one thing that is difficult. Why shouldn't he have just banned this other thing that deserves to be banned that is easier? That's kind of the phraseology of it, where he's saying, the governor just banned TikTok on the state devices. Shouldn't he have banned assault rifles before TikTok? He's saying the assault rifles are priority over TikTok, but the only potential way you could streamline that is to say that somehow, assault rifles are this great risk, and that banning them is just the exact equivalent. And saying I'm banning guns works like a magic snap of your fingers and it's banned, in the same way that saying I'm banning TikTok on state-issued devices kind of is that way, right? Because state-issued devices usually will have some kind of central control, and you can wipe, data from it remotely. So they're not at all equivalent in any, relevant logical flow, and especially not in practice or carrying
the
out
actual
or anything
execution.
like that.
Yeah. It's always interesting to me that they still like he's advocating for a specific thing to happen while not being specific in what what thing he would actually ban. Because like as you and I both know, and most of our listeners know, assault rifle is not an actual like technical term for what they're trying to get at. They're trying to get at AR-15s is what they would like to get at. And so just say AR-15s. But he also knows it's like, man, if I say AR-15s, people will Google. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't know. But only about 300 to 400 deaths a year occur from AR-15s. Basically, all the rest of gun deaths occur as a result of either suicide with a handgun or some sort of gang-related violence that occurs in an inner city. And so, no one is advocating. I mean, it'd be so hard for them to emotionally appeal to ban handguns, even though that is like, if it by their logic, by making something illegal, it's going to make things safer. That's what you'd have to go after. But there's just no public will, right, to do that. Maybe in some circles, maybe here in Seattle, there's a bit of it, but in general, everyone recognizes that as an absurd thing to do at its face value. But because the guns are black and they've got a pistol handle, they've got a stock, and they look like they're some military thing, they call it an assault rifle, and they can gin up all of this all of this fear, even though people literally get killed with blunt objects more than assault rifles or AR-15s each year. There's a really great for anyone listening that would like to go learn more about this or hear from someone who has actually experienced gun violence in his life. There's a guy named Andrew Pollack who lost his daughter was murdered in the Parkland school shooting, and he most people think of that Parkland shooting and the murders there. They think of David Hogg and some of these other students that came out of it as very anti-gun. Andrew Pollack's an actual adult, actually thought through a lot of these issues, lost his daughter to this murderer at the shooting, and is still able to critically think about the issues and make really good arguments. So he's got a Twitter and he's got a YouTube channel and stuff, and he's really great. So I'd encourage you guys to look him up, especially when people are trying to make emotional arguments like this.
Yeah, it's one thing you have to also recognize that the way that they use terminology like assault weapon is to play this game of inches and miles, just constantly push the boundary. So, okay, maybe you ban for some reason an AR-15, which is an absurd thing to do, but you ban it. Then that's gone. Now you just got to intuit the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And I think even just a tweet like this, where it's like, oh, you banned TikTok, why shouldn't you ban assault rifles? You just keep doing that over and over again in order to just maximize the level of public awareness of the issue or public discontent, even if it's not really based in anything that matters.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, moving on to our last one. We've had a bunch of Elon Musk content, I guess, just as of late, because he owns Twitter now, so that must mean that he's part of our feeds all the time. He tweets out, I believe this was today, if the Fed raises rates again next week, the recession will be greatly amplified. And I thought this was such an interesting one for us to talk about. What do you think? Good, bad, or indifferent?
I need time to process. I mean, it's a true take, I think. I think he's not mistaken in that when you raise rates, you cause recessions, but it's also not because the Fed is raising rates. Although, I mean, the Fed, don't get me wrong, the Fed doing any kind of activity in the economy is a bad idea. They shouldn't mess with the economy, and a lot of their meddling has caused exaggerated waves and ebbs and flows. But if you took the Fed out of the picture, rates would raise, and it would be the natural correction to what is essentially a large bubble. And so, yes, if the Fed raises rates, it will be amplified. If the Fed got out of the picture, rates would naturally rise and a recession would naturally occur to try to fix what has been messed with and tampered with so much.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that my evaluation of this take is that it's bad. And the reason I say it's bad is because I attached to it, and he didn't explicitly state this out, but he's trying to say, don't raise rates because there'll be a recession. Instead, we need to lower rates. And it would be bad if we raised rates. It's like, well, it's bad either way, right? So I'm inferring a bit of his like his solution, I guess, to the problem from it. And I think he would advocate for like lowering rates. He's done that in the past before. And, both of us really love Dave Smith, comic Dave Smith on Twitter, but he likens, the Federal Reserve and like the current situation we're in to like a drug addict, right? Like we have gotten high on the ability to have cheap money. Money at some point in our time, was 0%, right? Like you could get money for almost free, or certain actors could get money for almost free, and people that were homeowners could get money, 4, 5, 6, 7, $1 million for 2 to 3% interest rate on a mortgage, and that feels really, really good, right? Because you can get into something that is really awesome for really, really cheap, for a low down payment and a really, really low, monthly payment on that. The problem is it's not real, right? Like this high that we're feeling is not real. And eventually the only way to cure yourself from being addicted to something is to come off of it. And when you come off of it, there's going to be withdrawals. Like I think about that movie, The Last Samurai, when Tom Cruise, like he's an alcoholic and he ends up in the samurai village, and they basically like saying, hey, buddy, we're going to cut you off. Like you can't have the rice wine anymore. And he gets into withdrawals and gets a fever and is, convulsing and stuff on the floor. It's like, that's what a recession, that's when we raise rates artificially, it's still bad, but at least we're coming off of the high, right? Like we're moving in the right direction. And then we need to just abolish. Once the equilibrium sits in, just abolish the Federal Reserve, let banks individually set their interest rates. If banks are stupid with their money, they go out of business. And yes, the people that put their money in it lose their money. But then what results is that you have banks that are really, really, really savvy, really, really good at storing money and really good at choosing who and what they're going to lend to. It used to be that like, my wife and I are completing a transaction right now on a property, and it's crazy to me that I can, without ever sitting in front of this banker, I can go online, I can fill out a little stuff. I can say, hey, I make this much money from this and that. And they can pre-approve me for a loan that takes 30 years to pay off or whatever, without ever having to see me, hear what my plan is for the property, hear what my plan is business-wise, hear about my past track record. They just say, you have the right debt to income, you're employed, and yeah, we'll loan you a bunch of money. It's like, that's not how it used to be. It used to be that you had to go in, and that was the joke, right? Like, what, are you going to go visit the bank today because you're dressed up in a suit or whatever? You had to convince these people that if they gave you the money that their, the people that banked with them had given them to store and take care of, that you were going to be a good person at making sure that it's used properly and that you would be able to pay it back, or else the bank would go out of business. The low interest rates and the ability, fractional reserve banking has made it so that pain is not there, right? So if a bank is careless with their lending, they're able to get money for basically free. Like they can type a number into a computer somewhere and suddenly that mistake is erased. And that's not good because it creates artificial booms where people aren't actually, living within reality. And so, yeah, if we raise the rate, it's like saying, hey, buddy, hey, Tom Cruise, you don't get any more sake. Like, sorry, buddy, but like it's killing you. And yeah, you're going to feel like you're dying, for the next week or so, but it's going to be a lot better after you're done with it. And the problem with the government and the problem with the Federal Reserve is that no politician has a time horizon further than 4 years, right? So they just want to make sure that you feel real good. And as long as you feel good, they're going to stay in office and keep getting their paycheck. And then once they're out, come high or hell water, like whatever can happen, it's fine. But no president or no politician has the courage to actually say, hey, you're going to be worse off for basically the entirety of my time in power, even though it's the right thing to do, because they don't want that. They want you to feel good.
Yeah, exactly. So I think you're right. I think when we see takes that maybe are on a whim, like the words spoken are technically true, but they don't make a good point, you have to consider that context. And yeah. I think you're right. It's unfortunate because, during a time when Elon Musk is under fire for a lot of stupid things, I wish he wouldn't take very, partisan-ish talking points. And that's what this seems to be. I don't see how this benefits really anyone to say it in this way, unless you give the further context like you just did. I don't see how this benefits anyone except for maybe like, an extreme conservative who's trying to win an election or something like that, or just sowing seeds of doubt into the current administration, which happens to be the Democrats. Again, not that I'm against that. I don't mind sowing seeds, but I think you need to do it in a way that doesn't make you appear as like a hack. And I think this is more, you've sold your soul out kind of talk. Not that I think he has, but it appears more that way, right? And I think that's unfortunate because
it's like Trump. When Trump wanted to keep interest rates low, he'd tweet out like, or Powell or whoever it was, I can't remember, Yellen, don't raise the interest rates. It's like, the only reason you don't want to do it is because it's going to make you look bad, right? Yeah. And for Musk, it's like it's going to be harder for him to acquire capital to do stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And, it helps his current fan base who tend to be on the right now cheer him more. But it's disappointing because you want someone in that position to be good on sound economics. You want someone to be, talking about the realities of the economy in full context, not saying things, it's just like saying, if automation continues, more people will lose their current jobs. And it's like, okay, what are you trying to gin up by that? Are you giving the full context? And it's like, that is true, but also automation helps innovate in the sense that you can do more for less. People can now devote their time to other work. You create more resources with fewer costs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So giving these kinds of half contextualized takes it's very much an emotional seeking here rather than an informational one, even though the tweet is technically purely informational.
Yeah. And it's what Michael Malice says, right? It's factually true, right? Like, yeah, it's true that we will go into recession from raising interest rates. Like, don't infer though that that's a bad thing. I think it's a painful thing, but it's a good thing in the same way that a drug addict coming off of an addiction is a painful thing, but a good thing. We really need to make this happen because we've been living off of borrowed time, quite literally, for so long.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right.
Cool. Awesome, friends. Well, thanks for hanging out with us for this show. And again, please make sure like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Leave a comment. It really helps us out. And we will catch you on the next one.